I killed my father's legacy with a single sentence, right there under the glare of 1,000 flashbulbs, and the Secret Service didn't even draw their guns. Dad always said blood was thicker than justice. But he forgot that revenge tastes like rust on your tongue after you've swallowed years of his lies. And when I stepped up to that podium, microphone hot in my grip, I wasn't just speaking for the president. I was burying the man who buried me first. My name's Quinn Harlan. And if you grew up in the Rust Belt shadows of Pittsburgh, you know the Harlan name. It's etched into the steel mills that choked the Monongahela River. The union halls where Dad cut his teeth as a firebrand organizer before he sold his soul to the corner office. Harlan Steel wasn't just a company, it was a goddamn empire. Built on the backs of men like my grandfather, who coughed up black lung for a pension that never came. Dad, Richard Harlan, the silver-tongued kingpin, turned it into a Fortune 500 beast. All gleaming boardrooms and lobbyist brunches in D.C. I was supposed to be his heir, the golden boy with an MBA from Wharton and a jawline that matched his own. But that was before the boardroom coup, before the whispers turned to indictments, and before Dad looked me in the eye and said, "Quinn, you're not one of us anymore." It started on a muggy July afternoon in 2018, the kind where the air hangs heavy with the threat of thunderstorms and the faint tang of mill smoke that never quite leaves your clothes. I was 32, fresh off a merger that saved the company from a Chinese buyout. My merger, the one that had analysts calling me the next Harlan prodigy. Dad called me into his office on the top floor of the Harlan Tower, that glass fortress overlooking the Allegheny where he held court like a feudal lord. The room smelled of aged scotch and Cuban cigars, the walls lined with photos of him shaking hands with senators, governors, even a blurry shot with Obama from back when Dad was still pretending to give a shit about the working man. "Sit down, son," he said, not looking up from his desk. His voice had that gravelly timbre, honed from years of rallying crowds and crushing unions. I sat, expecting praise, maybe a corner office upgrade. Instead, he slid a folder across the mahogany, yellowed pages, redacted emails, wire transfers with my name stamped all over them like a scarlet letter. "What the hell is this?" I asked, flipping through it. Offshore accounts in the Caymans, bribes funneled through shell companies to grease EPA permits for the mills. Millions siphoned off, enough to tank the stock if it leaked. Dad leaned back, steepling his fingers. "It's insurance,
Quinn.
the kind that keeps this family afloat when the wolves come howling." I laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "Insurance? This is felony territory, Dad. Embezzlement, money laundering, Jesus. There's even a slush fund for that senator from Ohio." His eyes hardened, the way they did when he'd fire a lifer who dared ask for overtime. "And whose signature's on the approvals? Yours?"
Boy.
"Every damn one." My stomach dropped. I'd signed off on deals. Sure, routine stuff. The merger docs, compliance forms. But these were ghosts, forged in the dead of night by someone with access to my digital SIG and a grudge the size of Lake Erie. "You set me up," I whispered, the words tasting like battery acid. He didn't flinch. "The feds are closing in. EPA whistleblower. Some tree hugger from the riverfront. If they dig, they get me or worse. The whole board.
But you?
You're expendable. The prodigal son who got greedy. They'll slap your wrists, give you 5 years in a white-collar spa, and Harlan Steel sails on. Expendable. The word echoed in my skull like a hammer on anvil. I'd taken the fall for him before, small stuff, like that bar fight in college where I claimed the punches to keep his campaign clean, or the internship scandal where I buried the HR complaints so he could land that Pentagon contract. But this was my life, my future, flushed for his goddamn legacy. Why? I stood, chair scraping like nails on chalkboard. I'm your son. Blood. Remember? Dad's laugh was a bark, devoid of warmth. Blood's a currency.
Quinn. And yours just bounced.
Get a lawyer. Plead out. Or I'll make sure it's 20, not 5. I walked out of that tower a ghost, the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked windshield of my Audi as I drove aimlessly toward the hollows. Mom had died when I was 10, cancer, the kind that eats you from the inside out, and Dad had raised me on stories of Harlan grit, how we'd outlast the unions, the recessions, the Chinese.
Lies.
All of it. I crashed at my buddy Marco's place in Lawrenceville, a shotgun row house with leaky faucets and a fridge full of Iron City.
Marco.
Ex-steelworker turned Uber driver. Clapped me on the back. Family's a bitch.
Mun.
But you ain't done. The indictment hit 2 weeks later. Quinn Harlan. 32 counts of fraud and corruption. The press ate it up. Front page Inquirer headlines screaming, heir apparent's fall from grace. Dad played the grieving father on CNN. Voice cracking just enough to sell it. My boy made mistakes. We're all human. The board rallied behind him, voting him emergency CEO while I rotted in pretrial detention at Allegheny County Jail. Orange jumpsuit. Concrete bunk. The symphony of coughs and curses from guys who'd shank you for a cigarette. I pled guilty on his advice, reduced sentence. For years at FCI Canaan. Minimum security, but maximum isolation. Prison's a slow bleed. You learn the hierarchy quick, the lifers with tattoos like war maps. The white-collar weasels trading stock tips for ramen. I kept my head down, worked the library detail, devouring books on law, finance, revenge. Letters from Dad dried up after month 3. Marco smuggled in news clippings about Harlan Steel's record profits. Expansions into green energy, ironic, given the bribes that nearly killed the rivers. But one night, scrolling a contraband phone, I found it, a leaked email chain, buried in a hacker forum. Des signatures. Real this time, authorizing the forgeries. And more, ties to a DC fixer named Elias Crow. The kind of lobbyist who could buy senators like loose change. Elias Crow. The name stuck like burrs. I'd met him once. At a fundraiser in Georgetown. All slick hair and shark smiles. Whispering in Dad's ear about opportunities. Turns out, Crow wasn't just a fixer. He was the architect. Dad's old union days had ghosts, kickbacks from mobbed-up contractors. A suspicious fire at a rival mill in '89 that cleared the way for Harlan's rise. Crow had the dirt, leveraged it into a partnership. When the heat came, they pinned it on me, the clean slate. Parole came in 2022, early for good behavior. But the world had moved on. Harlan Steel stock was through the roof. Dad was knighted with some bullshit environmental award from the White House. I emerged into a Pittsburgh remade, self-driving Waymos zipping past vape shops. The mill's half museum, half tech incubator. Marco picked me up in his beat-up Prius, grinning like a fool. Welcome back, killer. Got a plan? Revenge, I said, staring at the scarred skyline. The Harlan way. But revenge isn't a bar brawl, it's a chess game in the dark. I started small, crashing at Marco's. driving nights for Uber while hitting the community college for cyber forensic certs. Online, I was a ghost, screen name Riverat87, digging through dark web dumps. FOIA requests filed under aliases. Dad thought he buried the secrets, but digital ink doesn't fade. By spring 23, I had a dossier. Crow's offshore ledgers. Dad's burner phone logs. Even a voice memo where Dad laughed about the kid taking the heat keeps the feds off our scent. The betrayal cut deepest in the quiet hours. I'd replay Mom's letters from her sickbed, urging me to honor the Harlan name, not knowing it was rotten at the core. Dad hadn't just framed me, he'd erased me, disowning me in a terse email to the family lawyer. Quinn's no son of mine. Cut him from the will. Aunt Lydia, my only ally, smuggled me cash and whispers. He's paranoid now.
Quinn.
Crow's got him by the balls. Pushing for that D.C. expansion. Presidential inauguration gala next year. He's angling for a cabinet nod. The gala. The White House Correspondents' Dinner. 2025 edition. Glitz and grit. Where Pauls and press mingle like oil and water. Dad's white whale. His ticket to immortality. And mine to the gallows.
I needed an in.
Enter Lena Vasquez. Investigative journo with a scar from chasing cartel stories in Juarez and a byline that made editors sweat. We met at a dive in the Strip District, over pierogies and PBR. She was all sharp edges, cropped black hair, tattoos peeking from her blazer cuffs, chasing a tip on corporate greenwashing. Harlan steals your beat, I asked, sliding her the dossier USB. Her eyes lit up like Christmas. This is dynamite. But why me? And why now? Because Dad said I didn't belong, I said, voice steady. And I'm gonna prove him wrong by burning his world down from the inside. Lena didn't flinch. Revenge porn's a bad look.
Quinn.
But truth? That's my kink. She vetted the files, cross-checked with her sources. By summer, we had a partnership, her bylines, my intel. She broke the first story in The Intercept, Rust Belt royalty, how Harlan Steel bribed its way to green glory. Stocks dipped 8%. Dad stonewalled, calling it fake news from socialist hacks. But the crack spread. Whistleblowers crawled out, ex-board members, jilted contractors. Crow went radio silent. His D.C. office shuttered overnight.
Dad fought dirty.
Private eyes tailed me, slashed Marco's tires, even doxed Lena's address with death threats. One night, I came home to find my laptop bricked, a single file salvaged, a video of Dad, drunk at a stag party, ranting, Quinn's a weak link. Should have drowned the little shit in the river like his mother wanted. Mom? Drowned? The autopsy said cancer complications, pills and pneumonia. But that line. It gnawed. I confronted Aunt Lydia over burner phone. What did he mean? Lydia? Silence. Then a sob. It wasn't cancer.
Quinn.
Overdose. She found out about the fire, the mill blaze. Knew Richard started it for insurance. Killed those 3 workers. She threatened to go public. He slipped something in her drink. Said it was mercy. The world tilted. My mother, murdered by the man who taught me to tie my shoes. The secret he'd buried under layers of grief and grit. I'd carried his sins my whole life, taking the blame for brawls, scandals. Now this fraud, while he played saint. Rage isn't hot. It's cold. Calculating. I doubled down. hacked Crow's remnants with a kid from the college, a whiz named Jamal who coded for fun. We traced the money, not just bribes, but election dark money funneled to the president's re-elect PAC. Dad wasn't just a CEO, he was a kingmaker, buying influence with blood money. The gala loomed. Invites gold embossed. Lena scored press credentials. I posed as her +1. A research assistant with forged creds. Dad would be there, schmoozing the commander-in-chief, arm around some starlet, toasting his ascent. But assent to what?
Fall.
I whispered to the mirror, practicing my speech. Words like bullets, betrayal, murder. The Harlan rot exposed. As the clock ticked to December, Pittsburgh's first snow blanketed the scars. Marco raised a glass at our last meet, to belonging nowhere but your own skin. Brother. I nodded, tasting the rust. To the stage. The night of the correspondence dinner hit D.C. Like a fever dream, limos clogging Pennsylvania Avenue. Paparazzi swarms thicker than summer gnats. The air electric with secrets and spandex gowns. I rode in with Lena, her beat-up Civic wedged between escalades, nerves jangling like loose change. You sure about this? She asked, adjusting her clutch mic. One wrong word, and we're both roadkill. I'm sure, I lied, palms slick on my rented tux. The dossier burned in my pocket, a USB talisman. Jamal's hack had gold, audio of Dad confessing the forgery to Crow, timestamps matching my prison stint. And the kicker, Crow's flip. Turns out, the fixer wasn't loyal. He'd been shopping the dirt to rivals, including a DOJ mole, hedging bets. Dad's empire was a house of cards. And I held the fan. The Washington Hilton was a circus, comics roasting the press, celebs air-kissing Pauls, the president holding court in a corner booth with his Veep, all southern drawl and shark grins. I scanned the crowd there. By the bar, Dad in his bespoke brioni, silver hair pomaded, laughing with a cluster of aides. He looked invincible, the way he always had. But I saw the tells now, the twitch in his jaw, the overbright eyes. Paranoia. Aunt Lydia called it.
Good.
Lena worked the room like a pro, trading barbs with journos, slipping me intros. Quinn Harlan, the prodigal, one editor from Politico slurred, 3 whiskeys deep. Heard you did Bird in the big house. Rehabbed yet. Rehabilitated enough to know a con when I see one, I shot back, clinking his glass. Inside, my gut churned. These were the gatekeepers, the ones who'd lapped up Dad's spin without a chew. Halfway through the rubber chicken, the MC called for toasts. Dad's turn, his big moment, slotted right before the president's remarks. He took the stage to polite applause, podium light haloing him like a prophet. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, he boomed, voice carrying that Pittsburgh bark polished for prime time. From the steel heartland to this shining capital, we've come far. Harlan Steel isn't just building bridges, we're forging the future. And with leaders like you, sir, that future's unbreakable. Applause swelled, genuine from his PAC donors, obligatory from the rest. He droned on tax cuts, deregulation, the American dream repackaged as Harlan gospel. I watched from the shadows, Lena's hand on my arm like an anchor. Your move, she whispered. But fate's a fickle bitch. As Dad rapped, yielding the mic, a stagehand fumbled, cord snag, feedback squeal that pierced like a siren. The crowd winced. Dad shot him a glare that could curdle milk. In the chaos, the president waved him off, gracious as ever. Richard, hell of a speech. But let's hear from someone fresh off the rest, your boy. Quinn. Right? He's here. Ain't he? The room froze. Dad's face drained to ash. He stammered. Mr. President. That's not on the card. But the prez, ever the showman, grinned into the lights. Come on up, son. Family night's the best part. Whispers rippled, scandal scent in the air. Lena shoved me forward. Marco's words echoed to the stage. I climbed those steps on autopilot, legs leaden, the world's eyes pinning me like specimens. The podium loomed, Dad's ghost still clinging to it, his Scotch breath, his cologne. I gripped the edges, knuckles white, and faced the sea of faces, stars, suits, the man who'd drone-struck half the Middle East without blinking. Mr. President, distinguished guests, I started, voice steady as rebar. Thank you for the honor. Dad, Richard, always said I didn't belong here. In this room, in the family, in the American story, he sold us all. Murmurs swelled. Dad, off stage, hissed into his phone, crow, probably, scrambling damage control. I pulled the USB, slotted it into the podium's port, a hack Jamal rigged, overriding the AV. The massive screen behind flickered to life. Emails, transfers, Dad's voice crackling through the speakers. The kid takes the heat, keeps the feds off our scent. Gasps rippled like wind through wheat. The president leaned forward, brow furrowed. Lena, Liv tweeted from the floor. Hashtags exploding. Harlan Fall prodigal speaks. I pressed on, words tumbling like avalanche. I went to prison for crimes I didn't commit. 4 years in a cage while Harlan Steele profited billions, bribes to bury pollution, dark money to buy your votes. Mr. President. And the fire? The one that killed 3 men in '89? Dad started it. My mother found out. He poisoned her to silence her. That's the Harlan legacy. Rust and ruin. Wrapped in red, white, and blue. The room erupted, shouts. Chairs scraping. A senator's wife fainting into caviar. Dad lunged on stage. Face purple. Secret Service materializing like smoke. Lies. All lies from a bitter ex-con. But the audio looped. Merciless, Mom's name. The pills. The confession slurred in Scotch. Crow burst from the wings. Slick as ever. But his eyes darted, betrayal's mirror. He'd flipped again, feeding me the files through anonymous drops, playing both sides for the highest bidder. Richard, he murmured. Too low for mics. I tried to warn you. The president stood, voice cutting the din like a knife. Enough. Security. Clear the stage. Quinn, you got balls. I'll give you that. But this is above my pay grade. Agents swarmed, hustling Dad away in a blur of elbows and epithets. I stood frozen as the screen went black. The crowd fracturing into factions, some cheering my guts, others decrying witch hunt, a few snapping pics for tomorrow's feeds. Lena reached me through the scrum, eyes wide. You did it.
Quinn.
The world's watching, but as they dragged me backstage for a debrief, the high crashed. Dad twisted in the guard's grip, locking eyes with me. Not rage, pity. You think this ends me? You're the fool. Son. Always were. The night blurred into interrogations, FBI suits in a holding room, coffee bitter as regret. Lena fielded calls from every outlet from Fox to MSNBC. The story trended worldwide. Harlan Air, a battlefield of memes and manifestos. Pundits split. I was a hero whistleblower, dismantling corrupt dynasties, or a vengeful psycho, smearing a patriot for personal grudges. Blood's thicker, one talking head opined, echoing Dad. But justice? That's the real American value, countered another. By dawn, I was cut loose, no charges. Not yet. The Prez's team issued a vague review statement, distancing while praising courageous voices. Dad vanished into a lawyer phalanx. Crow ghosted. Rumored fled to Andorra. Aunt Lydia wired funds. A tearful voicemail. Your mother would be proud. But watch your back. Quinn. Pittsburgh welcomed me like a leper. Marco threw an impromptu wake at the dive. Shots of Old Forester. Toasts to the prodigal's return. You walked on that stage, brother. Spoke truth to power. Dad's done. But sleep evaded me in a row house. Shadows twisting into Mom's face. Dad's laugh. The dossier had holes. Crow's flips hid deeper webs. A midnight email pinged. Anonymous. Nice show.
Kid.
But you just opened Pandora's box. Check the pack files. Your mom's not the only ghost.
I dove in?
Jamal on speed dial. The pack. Harlan's slush fund had bankrolled the president's 24 run, millions in consulting fees, routed through Crow's shells. And the sign-off, not just Dad.
A familiar scroll, Elena Ramirez.
The Prez's campaign chair. Mom's old college roommate, the one who'd ghosted after the suicide. Twist of the knife, the betrayal layered deeper. Dad hadn't acted alone. The White House inner circle knew. Greenlit the frame to protect their golden boy donor. My revenge? It hadn't toppled a throne. It cracked the Oval's foundation. Weeks bled into a media maelstrom. DC's underbelly churning like the Monongahela in flood. I holed up in a no-tell motel off I-70. Burner phone my lifeline. Jamal's code scraping servers for crumbs. The pack files were a hydra, every severed head sprouting two more, kickbacks to swing state reps. Quid pro quos for mill subsidies that poison groundwater. Elena Ramirez's name wove through it like poison ivy. Her memos coolly calculating. Harlan boy takes the fall, optics clean. POTUS owes RH big. RH, Richard Harlan. Dad. The public split like a fault line. Blue-check liberals hailed me as the everyman avenger. Petitions circling for a pardon ironic, since I was already out. MAGA diehards branded me a deep state plant, Dad a victim of woke cancel culture. Talk radio frothed. Quinn's a traitor to his blood, should have stayed in the Clink. Protests popped up, Rust Belt rallies chanting justice for the mills, countered by suits in D.C. Parks waving free Harlan signs. Lena rode the wave. Her book deal announced in Vanity Fair, Forged in Rust, A Son's Reckoning. She offered me co-author credit. I declined. This ain't redemption, Lena. It's war. Dad resurfaced in a 60 Minutes mea culpa, haggard in a cashmere sweater. Eyes misty. I failed my son. Made choices in the heat of crisis. But Quinn's anger. It's misplaced. The company's innocent. He's chasing shadows. Lies slick as oil. Ratings spiked 40%. Harlan stock rebounded on sympathy buys. Crow? Interpol warrant pending. But whispers said he'd cut a deal, testifying against Dad for immunity. Flipping like a weather vane in a gale. I needed proof.
The kind that stuck.
Aunt Lydia met me in a Cleveland coffee shop, incognito in a babushka. Elena's the key, she said, sliding a thumb drive. Your mom confided in her. The fire. The pills. Elena buried it. Told Richard it was handled. Now she's White House Chief of Staff. Untouchable. Untouchable? Bullshit. I flew coach to D.C., crashing on Lena's couch in Adams Morgan, a walk-up with leaky pipes and protest posters peeling from the walls. We tailed Elena, her sleek black SUV, to spin classes and donor dinners, her laugh tinkling like ice in a highball. One night, at a Klein dinner in Colorama, hedge fund vampires supping on seared foie, I slipped in as waiter. Bow tie strangling me. Tray of oysters balanced like a bomb. She was there, mid-40s fierce, red dress hugging curves, regaling a cluster with tales of 24 war stories. Dad lurked at the periphery, reinstated as advisor, their eyes locking in silent pact. I served her table, heart hammering, and when she reached for a shell,
Tritt, Champagneflutschätzering Herr Lebutins.
Shards glinting like accusations. Clumsy fuck, she hissed, but her gaze snagged on my face. Recognition dawned slow, then sharp.
Harlan.
The stage boy. Evening.
Elena I murmuró.
Mopping with a rag. Mom sends her regards. Her smile didn't crack, but the knuckles whitened on her stemware. Later, in the kitchen shadows, she cornered me, perfume cloying as regret. Bold move.
Quen.
But you're outmatched. Walk away, or I'll have you in Gitmo by dawn. Gitmo for truth? That's the American way now. I leaned in, voice low. I know about the memos. The cover-up. Mom's blood on your hands, too. She laughed. A brittle chime. Your mother's a footnote. Like you were. But Richard? He's useful. Presidents need men like him, ruthless, reliable. You're a glitch.
Glitch.
The word fueled the fire. I ghosted out. Drive in hand from Lydia, Elena's personal emails. Unredacted. Jackpot, confessions to a lover. Detailing the mercy kill, the frame as mutual benefit. I leaked it to Lena, who funneled to ProPublica. Boom. Headlines screaming, White House shadow. Chief of Staff's Harlan ties exposed. The backlash hit like a nor'easter. Elena resigned in a presser. Teary-eyed. Blaming miscommunications. Dad followed, stepping back amid bored revolt. But the twist, the real gut punch, came in a late-night call from the Prez's private line, patched through a handler. Quinn, his voice drawled, warm as bourbon. You stirred the pot good. Admire the grit. But here's the rub. That PAC money? It funded clinics in your old neighborhood, free cancer screenings, job training for ex-cons. Richard's dirt bought good. You toppled a house. But how many bricks land on the poor? I gripped the phone. Room spinning. Good? The mills still leaked toxins. Those clinics were PR band-aids on gangrene. But doubt wormed in. The Prez wasn't wrong. My revenge had ripples. Stocks crashed. Layoffs in Pittsburgh. Marco's Uber flooded with desperate riders. Aunt Lydia emailed. Proud. But is this victory? Climax brewed at the State of the Union address. February 26, Dad's Hail Mary. A last-ditch invite as reformed industrialist to tout bipartisan recovery. Security tight. But Lena's press pass got us in the gallery. I wasn't speaking this time. The Prez was eulogizing unity. nodding to Dad in the front row like a prodigal's embrace. As the chamber thrummed, applause thundering, cameras whirring, I stood, heart a war drum.
No mic.
No screen, just my voice, raw and rising over the din. Mr. President, this man beside you murdered my mother, framed his son for your dirty money. Chaos, gavels banging, ushers surging, the broadcast cutting to static. Dad whirled, face a rictus of shock. But the the Prez held up a hand, silencing the storm. Let him speak, he said, eyes locking mine across the abyss. The floor yielded, C-SPAN rolled. I poured it out, secrets unspooled like entrails, the fire, the poison, the bribes that built empires on graves. The chamber hung on every syllable. Factions fracturing live, Dems murmuring complicity, reps shouting cover-up. Dad bolted, tackled by Capitol Police. Elena, watching from home, tweeted her regret, flipping one last time to spill more beans for a plea. The speech ended in pandemonium, arrests, filibusters promised. The Prez's face a mask of calculated sorrow. Truth heals, he intoned later, off mic to aides. But his eyes said, you force my hand.
Kid.
Games changed. Back in Pittsburgh, spring thawed the hollows. Dad pled to manslaughter. 15 years, no trial. No spectacle. Crow extradited, singing like Sinatra for a dime. Harlan Steel splintered. Union buyout. Green overhaul. My name on the ethics board by proxy. Aunt Lydia deeded me Mom's old locket. Engraved, belong to yourself. But the twist lingers. Debate fodder for barstools and X-threads. Was I avenger or destroyer? The Prez knighted me in whispers, a quiet pardon. Job offer in the admin, but at what cost? Those clinics shuttered. Riots flared in the Rust Belt. Blaming elites like me. Lena and I, lovers now. Tangled in sheets and scandals. Her book a bestseller that asks, was the revenge worth the rust it left behind? I walk the Monongahela bank some nights. River murmuring secrets. Dad was right. I didn't belong in his world.
But in mine?
I built a stage from splinters. Spoke fire. And watched thrones tumble. Hero? Villain? Or just a son? Spitting rust at the stars?
The end? Pick your side. Me?
I sleep sounder now. But the taste of blood, it's always there.